Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us today on our wonderful Snickle and Fritz podcast. So today we are going to be talking about the wild pig or wild boar issues in North America. It's been a big problem in both the United States and Canada for a long while now. And I had not really heard of it until, our good pal Fritz here brought up the subject and told me a little bit about it. And I was like, well, that's not something I ever thought I would, imagine or hear about around here. So I had no clue about it. So he thought it would be a good topic to bring up to our podcast. And so yeah, you gonna take it over from here and tell these wonderful folks what the heck we're talking about today?
Yeah, Snickle. So today we're going to be talking about the wild pigs that are currently roaming around the Canadian prairies and a bit of eastern Ontario and Quebec. And so there's a lot of pigs that have been here for about uh, 30 years now. They started coming over in the 1980s when the government was setting up agriculture diversification programs. And so they brought over European wild boar into Canada, into farms in the prairies. And
But yeah, a bunch of pigs ended up being released and or escaping from different pig farms and whatnot, and that kind of made this problem a little worse. Um, but there's been so much impact due to these pigs over the years. Um, you know, Living in the prairies, growing up, it's a farmland, farm communities, and most people are farmers or related to farmers, and think about all their fields, their crops, their resources, and it takes up so much space of the land. And now we have a lot of these wild pigs and boar coming in and destroying fields and land and resources, polluting water sources. They're ripping up the landscape, and as they are looking for food. And their pigs are smart, and that just makes this problem a lot harder for the whole society, and there's an impact on the whole ecosystem of the land.
yeah, and if you go and you look at the pigs, and if you look at the position of the wild boar in the environment, they're generalists. So they can fill lots of different types of ecosystems. So they have this relatively large niche, and that's problematic because in the prairies there's no longer large predators. There is no longer wolves that are roaming around in packs or anything like that. So there is not much natural population control other than what humans do, and what humans do can be problematic at times. For example, there's been wild boar down in the US for a few hundred years now. And every year they cost the economy up to $1.5 billion in damaging agriculture. And so there's also this environmental impact of these pigs. Pigs, they like to go, they route around in the dirt, they drink a bunch of water, they stomp on natural grasses, they destroy natural wetlands. And when they do this, they destroy the environment, and so then other animals can't live there. Now there can't be frogs living there because the frog can't handle the sediment that's in the water from the wild boar. So they're also severely damaging these ecosystems and removing natural habitat. And so there's that massive environmental impact. And then, of course, they're also going out in fields, eating crops, routing around in the fields. And so that's where there's also massive economic impacts.
Yeah, and kind of going back on what you were saying earlier, So yeah, back to what you were saying earlier about the lack of predators for these wild pigs and boars in our area, the prairies here in Canada. I did hear, or I was reading somewhere that black bears and brown bears are actually decent predators, and I can't remember if it was in Saskatchewan or Manitoba or maybe Alberta or somewhere that there was a good number of bears taking out decent population sizes of these pigs. But then, in whatever that was, they also said that tigers were a good idea. They're good at hunting down pigs and boar because of their fast agility and reflexes and speed. And I was thinking, okay, so let's solve the problem by importing a crap ton of tigers into Canada. I'm sure that won't make any more problems.
Yes, I think you've got a good idea there. Let's go ahead with that.
Sheesh. But like, yeah, no, it's a big problem, and we don't have enough predators to be able to hunt them down, and humans, like you said too, have done quite a bit of damage over time. There's been hunting expeditions, and I think you can kind of say more about that. And I've been finding out about different trapping methods, pros and cons of that, and kind of what people have been trying to do in both United States and Canada to control this big issue.
Yeah, so there's a few different things that's been happening. So here in Alberta, the provincial government they set up a program. I believe it was in 2020 or 2021, but this program they wanted to get rid of the wild boar, so they offered hunters, I think it was $50 per wild boar pair of ears to prove that you killed the animal. And so the thing you gotta know about wild boar is that they're they're very smart and they're pretty social also. They can communicate with each other. And so if you go and have this one wild boar going and seeing a person hunting a different wild boar, then this one wild boar that survives is going to come back and let all of the other boar know that they should be avoiding people. So that's problematic because then you can't, when people are going and trying to get population estimates of the wild boar and map where they live so they can treat those areas for wild boar, it's very difficult to do that because the wild boar are now they're afraid of humans because they don't want to be hunted by us. They've learned to avoid humans so that they can not get shot. So it's creating this problem where there's not a great amount of data that is supporting policy making behind this. And so sometimes you do have those policies come in that are ineffective and create negative consequences. Well, seemingly on paper, you would think they would be something good. And I think that's the case of what we've had here in Alberta. Um, but there's also a different trapping program that provides money for pigs that have been trapped instead of hunted. Sky, and I think you know a bit more about trapping.
Yeah, I don't really know about the programs in place. I just heard about a couple different ways people have been trying to trap pigs. Some of these ways have worked better than others. In some cases and circumstances, people have built traps that the pigs will, come in and feed. But, something happened and they got spooked or scared. They let some of the others know with, a kind of a cry out. And so if there was any more of the pigs or boar coming in to feed, they might have run away. And the ones that were already trapped, they started to kind of freak out. And wild animals are wild animals. They look cute and soft, and and cool, from the outside, but at the end of the day, a wild animal is a wild animal, right? They're going to be wild at times. So they kind of, started to go a little crazy in there, and then they would break out, and then like you were saying, they're smart, they learn off each other, they learn off of that, and kind of then look for similar things in the future, right? So when the traps are inefficient and don't work as they should, or there's an issue, stuff happens, but then that's not great, and the pigs learn from it and might avoid other traps in the future. But one trapping system I saw, and they're doing different trials with, I think this was being done in the States, but I'm not 100% sure, but they were kind of digging like these big trenches or dugouts or ditches, and can't remember if they had what different measures they had to make this work, but they also used certain pig feed, that these boars really enjoy, and they would come and eat, and they would end up falling into this big, trap. And the people who were doing this, they started to experiment with the feed because they noticed other animals would sometimes get caught in these traps, and that wasn't the intent, and it could harm other wildlife and the ecosystems further. So they started to put in some other mixes into the feed that are like deer deterrents, but that pigs don't mind, like whatever. And so that seemed to work well. All the boar and the pigs kept coming, and they were trapping less of other wildlife, and they said that they were still going to continue to experiment with different feed methods to find what would work the best. And I think what's beneficial about these as well as is that if the pigs are more likely to all get trapped, less likely to escape, um then they're less likely to learn or tell the other pigs and boars about it. But then again, you've told me before that they can burrow, so I don't know. I guess it would have to be something you'd have to be checking on with quite often to be keeping an eye on them. And then once you got the pigs, I'm not quite sure how they go about dealing with them at that point. So that's kind of what I have on that. So, but it sounds like trapping is one of the best ways. It's just being able to do it efficiently, causing the less or least amount of harm to animals and the environment, and protecting what's there.
And I do think that's probably the most effective way of doing it because naturally, the wild boar, they can survive the winters, so the cold isn't a huge problem for them. They go and they make these things called pigloos, and they basically create like dens in the snow and snow drifts and that type of stuff. And they can live in there and survive the winter pretty easily. So you find them all the way up into northwestern Alberta and then down all the way through the prairies to central Manitoba. So they have this really broad range and they're able to survive the cold prairie winter temperatures where it can get down to -30, -35, then plus the wind chill, whatever that is. So these really are animals that are well equipped to surviving in this environment, especially considering that there's not many natural predators. But that is cool, Sky. When you were mentioning the grizzly bears and the black bear, and because I know that lately the black bear populations in certain areas in Saskatchewan have been increasing, and so
Hmm.
you're having the introduction of or the strengthening of this predation power in that area. And so that might impact the wild boar population. Yeah.
Well, that would be good. Maybe we don't have to release a bunch of tigers in the prairies. Um, but thinking about like pigs and boars in general, like back in the day, they were used to, more mild climates, slightly warmer climates. But over time, and with them being brought into more harsh climates over time, especially the boars around and in Canada, they've kind of evolved to be able to, bear the weather um, much better. Like they might have tougher, thicker hides, longer, bigger tusks, longer, thicker fur, and, who knows what else, but they've been able to adapt to our beautifully, wonderfully, horribly cold Canadian winters.
Yeah, and they're able to handle the summers when it gets up to plus 30, plus 35 sometimes.
Heck yeah.
Um, so they can handle this extreme temperature fluctuation. So these really are generalist animals, and they're difficult to exterminate because they reproduce so quickly. They can do it at a young age, and they can do it
At
every
6
year. I
months
think.
old.
Yeah, it's insane.
Yeah, they
So
reach
you
maturity,
have
sexual
this
maturity at
huge
6 months. Sorry,
Yeah,
Brad.
so you have this huge niche for these pigs to fill. So of course they're going to be reproducing and filling that niche because the prairies, there's a lot of land to be eaten and run around on.
Yeah. And um with that too, it's horrible. We have so many farms, so many crops and fields and different, species in the prairies and ways of life. And, this can greatly impact humans, not only in a, economic, ecological standpoint, but also health. So when the boars are coming in running amok, they're trampling over and in people's farms and eating crops, and if they're end up intermingling it with any of the animals on the farm, or maybe if their droppings are littered all over the farm and gets into some of the crops, or the animals eat it or something, there's a high chances of, well, I'm not really sure if high chances, but there's many chances of different, both like infections and diseases and parasite contamination. Um, so these wild boars will bring in diseases and parasites into the farm, and it can pass over into the farm animals. It could spread along the animals. Some diseases can spread from pig or swine to human, or, if you're eating that animal that maybe caught it from a boar or caught it from another pig who had contact with this boar, um, and maybe you're eating a nice fresh pork chop, and you could, become ill. And, some of the illnesses and diseases are, you know, more or less lethal than others, but that's still a big problem, and it can threat the animals. It could threaten farmers' livelihoods. It could threaten the whole population. And it's kind of funny because pigs started to be brought in more often, I think, in the 1980s, because, farmers were wanting to increase their pork production. But in turn, this made this whole problem worse, kind of in general.
Yeah, and these pigs, they're also living in Canada's prairie, in the grasslands. Naturally, there should be a bunch of grasslands all over Alberta and Saskatchewan and southern Manitoba, but there really isn't anymore. Over 80% of Canada's natural prairie grasslands have been destroyed, converted to agriculture, which, of course, that's essential for us, and that's economically that's important, and we also need food. So it's a very big industry here in the prairies. But you also have to acknowledge that 80% loss of grasslands is a huge amount. And then if you have wild boar also going in there and running around in these grasslands and changing the ecosystem. That's just another thing stacked on top of it against the grasslands.
Yeah.
I always find it funny because on social media apps, I get um, ads from Sustainability Saskatchewan. I've seen this also in the airport, Pearson International in Toronto. And there's these advertisements from Sustainability or Sustainable Saskatchewan. Yeah, I believe it's funded by the government of Saskatchewan. It's talking about the benefits of carbon storage from growing fields and crops in Saskatchewan. And so it's like saying that it's so good from a carbon storage perspective because that removes carbon from the atmosphere and reduces climate change. So they're marketing that from farming as a good thing, but in reality, it's not as effective as natural grasslands. Natural grasslands have root systems that are way deeper and thicker than crops because natural grasses live year over year. They don't get harvested every year, and so they're able to consume a lot more carbon from the atmosphere. And so the this organization is marketing itself as farming is good for carbon storage when in reality it's the complete opposite.
Well, yeah, I could see that because, like, if we only have these plants growing in the ground for, you know, X amount of time a year, I'm not a farmer myself. I don't know how all that works. But, they're not in the ground for very long until they're eventually harvested and used for whatever they're used for or sent off or, blah, blah, blah. And, they're always moving the soil around and, you know, adding different fertilizers or chemicals to keep away bugs and other pests and things like that, and so no, it's not like they have the time to take root, to really root into the soil, and that's actually a really healthy thing for the soil, because the further the roots kind of go down, the more they kind of loosen the soil up, I think, a little bit around them, which is, makes good soil, I think, eventually. I'm no biologist or plant geek, so I'm just trying to remember things from I think bio class long ago.
Yeah, and all of the soil that exists in the prairies, it comes from the weathering of the Rocky Mountains. So
Hmm.
it's very nutrient rich because we're in the Western Canadian Sedimentary Basin. That's kind of what this area is called, or at least according to geologists. And so we have these really effective ecosystems, very highly productive. They go through a lot of carbon, they consume a lot of it. And so all of the conversion that's been happening, and then the pigs running on top of it, eating all the grass, that also weakens the ecosystem.
Yeah, now I'm just picturing like pigs in Minecraft going around and eating the grass right now.
And you can ride the pigs too in Minecraft if you have
Oh.
the fishing rod with the
So,
carrot.
so are you saying that if we go out, find us some wild boar in the prairies, grab a fishing rod, put a carrot on the end, we could just take these wild boar for a ride?
I think so.
So we
Yeah,
don't need
we'll try that.
to pay
You can
for
go ahead
gas
first, and
anymore.
I'll
Just
come with a video camera, and it'll be good.
well, I don't know. It might be hard because I heard that these pigs and boar are highly nocturnal, actually, as well. They do a lot of their uh, scavenging or hunting and gathering and picking through fields and resources in the night, which also makes it harder for us humans to hunt and catch them.
As we'll have to get some night vision goggles or something like that.
Oh dear. Uh, yeah, these good old pigs.
So when you look at these problems that come from these pigs, and it reminds me of a different story, honestly. Um, Around, well, a long time ago when settlers first came in and colonized um, the areas of the prairies, there was lots of wolves around here. And of course, wolves and farming and ranching don't really go along well. So eventually they were pushed out by people. And if you go and you look down at Yellowstone National Park, for example, they did, or most of their wolves were killed by farmers and ranchers and hunters who didn't want the wolves eating their sheep and cows and costing them a lot of money, which I can
What?
understand that. Um, but this created some environmental issues. And so you remove the predator from the top, and then there was a lot more deer that could live around in the areas around Yellowstone National Park. So you have a lot more deer, and that means the deer are going and eating the grass and eating trees and preventing trees from growing. So what this means is that if you get rid of that top predator, you're going to have grassland expansion in national parks in Yellowstone, and you're going to have forests that are slowly shrinking. And it's not like the forest is going to instantly change. Sometimes you need like a natural event to instigate that change. Like if you have a forest fire come through, that can mark the transition into a grassland. If after the fire, the trees that try to sprout in that area are all eaten by these deer. So you have a transformation of the landscape. And so when they actually reintroduced wolves into Yellowstone, that predation pressure on the deer and the moose and the ungulates and antelope and that all of those animals, um, that meant that the forests could go expand again because there wasn't constantly these animals eating the baby trees, the saplings.
Hmm, interesting. That just kind of reminded me of in the summertime when we're in our hometown and we're walking through the park and we go and stop by the beaver dam in the drainage ditch, and we'll stand there and just look at it for a good 20 minutes and look how the beavers built it, and we see all the sticks and their paths that they, use, all the time. And, it's very interesting, and we care and like the wildlife, but then again, at the end of the day, these wildlife animals are also a pest to our current environments. I don't know all the details, but I do know some people who, you know, hunt beaver for the city, and as much as I hate it, I do understand it, but I do love, being able to go and see what these different creatures can do. And going back to the wild pigs and boars, they've now been in our, you know, ecosystems and in the prairies for quite a while now. It's not necessarily a new thing, but it is becoming more problematic because it has been the last 30, 40 years this has started um, to become a problem in the first place, really, in Canada at least. And like, imagine if we were to just snap our fingers and boom, all these wild boar are gone. What do you think would happen to the habitat and the other animals and the current ecosystems where they're at?
Yeah, you would see big changes, honestly, because, well, even just natural areas, those wetlands, they're so important for holding water and cleaning water. And without them, things dry up really quickly. They store moisture. They make it harder for water to evaporate into the atmosphere. And so these are really essential ecosystems. And this year in the prairies, we're probably going into a pretty bad drought. Um, it'll be one of the worst ones in like 20 years, about. So it's not going to be good. And even like right now, it is early April.
It's March, Brett. It's early March. Oh my.
Okay, it's early March. And in central Alberta, we don't have a ton of snow. We have almost nothing. So you look at the role of these environments that the pigs have been destroying, and you see how important they're going to be in drought years. Maybe having a few more natural wetland areas is going to be better because it can save up water.
Mhm.
And you don't always see those benefits because those benefits are widespread. They happen in different areas all over the prairies. But it's just a very important ecosystem service, just the protection and cleaning and providing of water. And when we destroy these natural areas, when we have invasive species like the wild boar coming in, it makes us less resilient to drought, and it
Mhm.
makes these drought events worse when they happen.
Yeah. And it's been a, strange winter in the prairies. Me myself, I'm not complaining very much about it, but I understand how others might, and farmers for this upcoming spring and summer, cuz it's been very very mild. Like typically, in Saskatchewan primarily and in parts of the prairies, our winters can be harsh. It is typically spent with, being from -25 to -40 degrees Celsius, with, you know, so much snow, coming down, all the time, and, you know, horrid conditions quite often. But this year it's been very mild. We didn't really get much snow until I think it was December. And even then it was like mid to late December when we really got some snow. But then we didn't even have a big snowfall till just a little while ago, and we got it good. But and then a little more a few days after that. But the temperatures haven't been as severe either. Like, I don't think it's really been past -30 something, you know, for the majority of this winter. It's been, in the -20s for the most part, or even warmer than that. There's been a large majorities of this winter where it's been, -10 and up. And especially for you in Alberta right now, Brett, you were saying you're wearing shorts today and that there's very little snow. Where I'm looking out right now, there's snow, but it's pretty nice out today here. But I'm not wearing shorts, although I think I could, just because I'm cold resistant, compared to Brett anyway. But it's just kind of crazy. So I'm predicting that in the spring and summer, it will be quite dry. The farmers will be complaining, that there's not enough water, that we're in a drought. And, I know that we'll see the impact every day, generally, our lawns in, the cities or in town, unless they are, watered regularly, which can be expensive, and if there's not enough moisture in the ground, there's not enough rain, the lawns will get brown, different plants won't, be able to thrive and survive very well. Different trees and plant life will, it'll be sick, won't be able to survive. And then animals will suffer because, there's less plants for them that they eat, and the land isn't as fertile, and again, that's not good for the farmers, for their business, because then they can't really plant and grow their product to the best they can, of no fault of their own, right? Um And I feel bad for these farmers because, especially here in Canada and the States, back in the day, people came from, Europe especially, and they got plots of land to start farms on back in the day. And these farms have been in families for generations. So, um, people are suffering, which in turn makes, their kids will suffer. And, the generations after them, if these farms are able to survive and stay in the families, right? But there's so much impact to such weird little things in nature and society and how humans have impacted the world in ways they probably did not mean to or ever think they could.
Yeah, well said, Sky. And I'm pretty lucky here in Alberta, honestly, with the Chinooks coming in. Today is +9. Um, and yeah, honestly, it's one of the reasons that I live here. Um,
Ooh, it's +6 here
but
apparently. I could
oh,
go out in
that's pretty
shorts.
good. That's pretty good.
That's definitely shorts weather for Sky. I would wear shorts up to -4 in a good weather-ish kind of way.
Yeah, Sky, I never know how you did it.
Yeah, I'm tough. Ah. But yeah, I don't know. Well, that was an interesting topic today, Brett, and just want to thank everyone for listening in. And like always, put your thoughts and opinions and whatever in the comments. Give us some suggestions for some topics that you'd like to hear us discuss in the future. And yeah, Brett, you got any last words?
Yeah, I guess give us some comments, give us some ideas to talk about, because otherwise, next time we'll have to talk about Norwegian cows. And yeah, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. And thanks for joining us today.
Yeah. Talk with you all next time and have a pleasant rest of your day. Take care.